Hello, welcome to the StarCityGames.com Team Constructed Open in Atlanta, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard and XSplit. I'm Nick Miller alongside Andrew Phillips, a longtime Legacy player, and your team is here doing pretty well this weekend.
Yes, sir. So far we're 9-3 today with this deck. So far I'm 11-1 so far with my records of games.
All right, and shout out to your team real quick, because this is a Team Constructed event. So who all are you playing with, and where are you guys from?
We're locals. My teammates are Kyle Apgar and Pete Van Dyke. We're doing a great job. The guys have been awesome, and it's their kind of first major event in quite a while, so it's been a lot of fun. You know, it's been a long time for me, but I'm glad to be back playing and having some fun.
Right, and you're doing very well. 11-1, as you said, through 12 rounds. You know, no one has buys here. This is Legacy, and you're doing a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, pushed together in a Reanimator depth strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the strategy of the deck was obviously Reanimator is a strong package in Legacy for game one, but we also wanted to have a backup of Dark Depths because a lot of decks just don't have a lot of interaction with it, and if they do, they may have Wasteland, but they may not have any interaction with the Reanimator. So it screws up their sideboard plans, it changes their dynamics of the game, it creates more variables where you have more turn two, just instant wins, or setups where it's just you're just going to win. So.
Right, and we've seen the Depths package kind of slot into a lot of different decks in Legacy, whether it's Jund or, you know, the Turbo Depths deck, which is, you know, green and black. But now we're moving it into the Reanimator room, where Reanimator has also occupied a bunch of different decks as well. So how do you pick which side you want and know what the final configuration is?
Well, I looked at it for a while coming up to this event. You know, we planned this a couple months ago. We're like, it's team tournaments. You know, opens I don't participate in too often because I have a busy schedule, but the team we made time for. But we were happy to, you know, look at the deck. I looked at the Turbo Lands Dark Depths that plays like the, you know, some elf mana to quickly accelerate out our Dark Depths. I always love Reanimator. We've seen some versions online that are older, you know, 3 or 4 years old, that kind of put up some numbers or, you know, catches people by surprise on some of the MTG Goldfish stuff. So kind of took some of those elements from column A, column B and blended it, you know, play tested it a lot. We tried stuff like, we had Reanimates instead of Exhumes in the deck for a little while. You know, too many people are playing stuff like Abrupt Decay or some type of small enchantment removal. So I made it too, the variables a little too different sometimes where you needed a creature to stick around and it just wasn't going to happen. So in the Disruption package, I mean, Collective Brutality I think is what pushed this deck over the top.
Right, we get the Disruption package, which is, Thoughtseize is obviously very good, but Collective Brutality has been slotting into a bunch of different decks, Modern and Legacy. It has so much flexibility. You get to kill, you know, Deathrite Shaman or Delver, and you get to rip something from their hand. Plus, you want to be putting cards in your graveyard anyway.
That's the #1 feature of it, is that discarding your creature. So many times with Reanimator, you're only playing 3 or 4 creatures, and if you draw 1 or 2 of them, you're stuck. And you know, this is the way to get them in the yard somehow while getting a great bonus off of it.
Right, because this deck isn't running Careful Study or Faithless Looting, any of that. You're strictly entombing your creatures and then taking them from there.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, so our Reanimated package, you know, you have Reanimate, Exhume, and Entomb, but then your creatures are what we usually see in the Reanimator decks: Gristlebrand, you know, enemy #1, then your white creatures, and then Grave Titan 4, usually Karakas and things like that.
Yep.
All right, then we move into the Turbo Depths package, where you have, you know, Vampire Hexmage, which is going to do great work alongside Dark Depths, but you also have the Thespian Stage, whole, you know, Pithing Needle package, where you can shut down Wastelands and that kind of thing too.
Yep. Absolutely.
How's this deck operating, you know, baseline? How many times are you killing with the 2020? How many times are you kind of going toward the creature?
Surprisingly, this weekend, the Dark Depths has been the MVP. It really has put out the Marriage Age tokens. I mean, I don't think anybody has ever actually dealt with a token yet. I haven't had it, you know, swords. I haven't had it bounced. I haven't had it sacked to either a Liliana effect or a Diabolic Deed effect or anything like that. So honestly, the Dark Depths is really what gets people, because they have very little interaction with it. If they don't have a Wasteland, or if I have a couple sources where I've had some times where they have a Wasteland or 2, but I have multiple ways to activate in response, I can still get my 20/20.
You also have Urborg in this deck, so your Dark Depths gets to tap for mana occasionally, so pretty good there. And then I got to talk about this. 3 copies Beseech the Queen. We don't see this one a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely been the one that people have had to pick up and read the text on most this weekend. So, you know, the text on it says, you know, go search for a card with converted mana cost equal to less than the number of lands you control. So even with just 1 or 2 lands, you get almost anything you want in your deck. You're Entomb when you need it, you're Exhume if you need that one. Go get the Hexmage if you have Dark Depths ready to go. So it has an answer package. We have 1 Pithing Needle in the main deck to deal with stuff like you said, Wasteland, Deathrite Shamans if you're worried about your graveyard being removed. Sometimes some other weird effects if they're playing some artifact deck or something else you're not ready for. Maybe you can stop the ability. I know there's a Tesserator deck doing real well in some of the Legacy right now. Sure. So, you know, put that out, name Tesserate, you're good. So we've got
all your bases covered. All right, so then we move to the sideboard, and because we're basically a mono black deck, you're kind of limited in what you can do, but you have some haymakers here. You got the 4 Leyline of the Void, and then you go into the Helm of Obedience switcheroo. When is this happening?
It's very greedy. So depending on the matchups, generally I've almost been boarding it in exclusively games 2 or 3 because a lot of decks have Graveyard Hate. They have Fairy Macabre, they have Surgical Extractions, they have some way to interact with your graveyard or Leyline themselves. So it creates a different variable. It's 3-part combos. I mean, people are not ready for 3 different 2-card combo interactions. So a lot of times they just have no idea. It comes out of left field. I have a Leyline of the Void out and they think maybe it's just to get rid of my graveyard. So many people are playing graveyard, recursion, or interaction decks. They're like, okay, that's just, he's gonna board in to get rid of my stuff that could be useful. And they just do not see the Beseech the Queen into the Helm, casting it, activating at the same turn. And I've had a lot of, opponents just stare at their hand, ask their buddies, am I dead? And they're just like, yeah, you're dead.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do.
No.
This operates very much like the vintage 2-card Monty deck, which has a bunch of those little packages running around as well that your opponent can only adjust or adapt for so many of them. You're going to hit them with one of them.
Yes, sir.
Then you have more Graveyard Hate with Surgical and Extirpate. Then I like this quite a bit. We've got 2 copies of Nature's Ruin when you really just got to hose the Elves decks.
Yeah, I hope Twitter doesn't kill me on that. I know Parish is better. I just couldn't find my Parishes in time, and I had some old Nature's Ruin. I like the art. It's Portal card. It's fun. It does the same thing essentially. There's not a lot of regeneration in Legacy as much, so it's not a huge factor.
Right.
And then Engineer Plague, of course, for surprisingly really good against Death and Taxes, since predominantly all their creatures are human. It keeps them off the board. Obviously against Elves, it keeps all their 1/1s off the board. And Delver, it's not bad because most of their guys like Young Pyromancer and Delver, if they're playing those, human gets them off the board.
Get those as well. Then you have a Null Rod for your artifacts, and then 2 in a Mask and another Collective Brutality as your discard or disruption.
Yes, and deck changes in the future, I absolutely would probably find some way to stick that Collective Brutality in the main deck, even probably above a Thoughtseize. It's just, it does so much heavy lifting. The variables of what you can do, even the life gain incrementally has been useful to keep me alive to win the next turn. So it's been fantastic. Null Rod this weekend's been kind of a dud for me. May have been the meta call was not there. I thought I might see more Mud decks or something with more artifact activations, but I didn't. Unmask is in there just for control decks to get that free. I had to conserve my mana, so I need to go off. I need to make sure they don't have anything or remove it if it need be.
All right, so where do you think this deck fits in a open metagame versus the team metagame? I assume you kind of built this deck with a plan to beat certain decks in the team field. How do you think it is in an open field?
Open field, like the main deck wouldn't change really at all. That would be your sideboard tech change. I still like keeping the package Leyline with the Helm because that gives you another out. That would be a call of what your sideboard would be. Open, you may catch a few people off guard because they just don't know what you're on. A lot of opponents made mistakes where game 1 they thought I was just on Reanimator and they didn't take into account Dark Depths and that got them. Or I got him Dark Depths on turn 2, so like, oh, he's on Turbo Dark Depths, I'm not going to board any Graveyard Hate, and then next game it's like, oh, first turn Grizzlebrand, and there's like, I literally have nothing to deal with this. So it can catch a lot of people off guard. If the deck becomes more well-known and people start doing well with it, then obviously your variables go out the door, but it's still hard to deal with. Even when some people made the right guess and they knew what I was on, they just didn't have the answer. If they didn't have the Force of Will, if they didn't have the correct counterspell or a graveyard removal at that time, they were just, dead.
All right, well, you're off to a great start. Your team's still in contention, top 8's on the line, so you guys are fighting for that.
3 more to win.
You got a great record. The deck looks awesome. Thanks for joining me here in the Sideboard.
Nick. Appreciate it.
Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Atlanta.